afternoon, everyone. Hello there, and welcome to this webinar that we're running today on AI for B2B growth, informing you how to transform your client acquisition. My name's Luke Hampson. I work with Barclays Eagle Labs, and I'm an ecosystem manager for Eagle Labs, working down on the south coast, so Portsmouth and Southampton, that Solent region. I'm really excited today to be joined, though, by one of my members that works out of our lab in Portsmouth, who's on with us today, called Mark Cann from Growth Warriors. I'm going to dip into an intro with Mark later, but before I do that, I'm going to just have to sort of reel off a few bits just to plug Eagle Labs, some of the offerings that we've got on at the moment, which could be of interest, and then a really short disclaimer before we get into business. So yeah, Eagle Labs, for those that don't know what we're about, we're here basically to connect up UK's entrepreneurial ecosystems. We've got 42 lab locations around the country. So those are physical sites that come with networks, obviously. We have a whole bunch of business support activity for early stage businesses all the way through to corporates and everything in between. Just going to kind of plug just three areas that we've got live at the moment, which might be of interest to some of those on the call here. So firstly, we've got our funding readiness program, which is a program that we run 4 times a year. This is a program that teaches you about the funding landscape. So whether it's grant applications you're looking for, some equity investment, or potentially other areas of funding, we're going to teach you about the broad spectrum, basically, over a 12-week period. That's all free to access, as everything is with Eagle Labs. You don't have to bank with us. It's essentially a free and open offering. So yeah, check out the funding readiness program, because we're open for applications right now, and that'll be kicking off in April. So do look out for that. As a nice segue on from the funding readiness program, I'd like to plug our demo directory, which is our online investor connectivity platform. It's a way of you showcasing your business to over 500 investors. And it's really worth doing because, you have to deliver that pitch once and ultimately get all those eyes and ears looking at your investment ask. So have a look for that if that's of interest. And lastly, it's an always-on part of our initiative, which is called the Eagle Labs Academy, which is our learning platform. We developed this in collaboration with some of the digital growth grant money that came across from UK government, and we've worked with experts to deliver some content around this platform, and it really does have a lot in there. There's so much in the box. So whether it's kind of starting your business or scaling, there's something there for everyone. Whether it's marketing and sales or fundraising, have a look at that, because some great resources in there. Okay, I'm now just going to read out a short disclaimer before passing over to the main event with Mark. But let me just read this through. So we've asked Mark to join us today to provide some tips and tricks on B2B client acquisition using AI tools. The topics discussed are an overview of options for you to think about to help with your independent research and business decisions, so they aren't intended as recommendations or advice. Remember, as well as that, your business has its own individual circumstances. The statements and views expressed may not be applicable or suitable for your business. If you found yourself here via YouTube, you can find the link on Vivox in the description below. And to be able to join us in the chat, you need to do that. Well, that's enough from me now then. So it's time to pass over to Mark to introduce himself and to dive into today's session. So I'm just going to wait for a slide to come up there, which should be on its way. There we go. So yeah, I've known Mark for over a year now. As I say, he works out of our Eagle Lab in Southampton, and he's working on some interesting business activity. He's actually worked with a couple of really successful scale-ups in London for a good decade, I understand, and obviously learned a lot during that time. He's gained a lot of experience. He's now a mentor and has funded over 100 founders and marketeers on thegrowthmentor.com. And he's advised and mentored for the London Mayor's incubator as well. And lastly there, he loves basketball, arguably too much. So we talk about that a lot as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Mark, and I'll see you again at the, we'll be sort of chipping back in at the end. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Luke. Today, thanks for joining first, everybody. I understand you're sort of from all over the UK and possibly beyond. So what I wanted to do today is like take you through a couple of ideas, but also take you through a case study as well. So here's just like a brief of what I'm going to go through. Essentially, I'm going to give you a taster of what you can do with Gen AI. I'm sure you've all used ChatGPT and Claude and other tools. I'm going to show you how AI can save you some time. That's relating to revenue generation and just otherwise as well. And I'm going to go through how I helped like a local small business in Hampshire who had never used AI and they'd never gone to market before with enterprises. And then, give you a nice offer at the end, which you're open to take or not. So I wanted to kick it off with, this was kind of the whole sort of inspiration for coming up with this webinar, the state of productivity for SMEs in the UK and why should you care about it and why now, basically. So traditionally, it's been a David and Goliath situation where enterprises have had access to the best tech and SMEs have always struggled. And I think that's really like changed with AI, like leveling the playing field a little bit. So in terms of like some research I got from McKinsey, if you look at the ICT sector, which is kind of quite a lot of the UK growth area, you've got like they're only 58% as productive as larger companies. And McKinsey, estimate that if you were to narrow that gap of 2.1%, you'd essentially create 73 billion worth of value. So with that in mind, I'm going to go on to the why. So I looked further into it and I saw that, out of just under 5,000 businesses across US, France, Germany, and Spain, 1,000 UK SMEs were surveyed for this, and only 7% of UK SMBs like consider their AI knowledge to be very good compared to say like 32% in the US. And almost half of those, 48%, said that their knowledge of the technology was fairly poor or very poor. And yeah, unfortunately, a lot of those other people have actually never used an AI tool before. The UK come up as the highest percentage from any country surveyed, which is disappointing considering we've got such a culture of like innovation and tech. So today I'm just going to go through a few use cases. So sorry, to go on from that, this is what I think it is from the hiring research I've done. In short, there's less jobs being advertised, which is lowering the productivity per existing employee. They've got more pressures to deliver and essentially less hours to do it in. So with that in mind, I think solutions like generative AI could really support existing managers with their daily task activity, whether it's on a process basis and improving process, or maybe on a sort of task per app basis. So just going to talk a bit about my story because I think it will sort of shed some light on kind of how I've started using it as an example. So, go back to 2021, I was working as head of demand generation for a growing B2B software company in the education space. Each day I'd spend most of my time either managing external data researchers, doing some of the work for them, or researching new data software providers, all of who promised more accuracy than the other one and cost far too much money. The result was spending less time on the important parts like the go-to-market strategy, the creative parts of it, what to say to prospects, and basically, creating eye-catching outbound marketing campaigns for creating better leads for the sales guys. So I thought to myself, there has to be a better way. So before we go into kind of the AI examples, I just thought I thought we'd play a game to make sure that everybody's awake, and also it's a bit of a fun to start the presentation. So if you've got your phone in front of you, or maybe your laptop, then if you want to open ChatGPT or Claude.ai, and what I'll do is I'll just sort of pause for a few minutes, because the best thing to do here to make it sort of to be able to keep up with the game, I guess, would be to enable your microphone. If you're not, if you don't want to do that, that's completely fine. I just want to give the audience some options so that they can then just speak into it. So I'll just pause for sort of 30 seconds and then we can go from there. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to ask ChatGPT or Claude that same. Basically, you're going to answer that same question, basically, and then we're going to put it into ChatGPT and then put it all together, basically, and see what we get in the end. So, give me a location in England. So for me, it's going to be York. So the next one's going to be the type of B2B business. I think I'm going to go with an accounting firm. And you know, what's the weather like there? You know, it's England after all. I'm going to say it's overcast for today. So we're going to name a type of animal. I think we're going to go for a monkey. What outcome do we want? Well, I was thinking about this. We could be profitable, but let's say we all want to be millionaires by the afternoon. So we want to name a problem at the office. It's got to be something that is a real, real pain. So I'm going to say that the door in the downstairs toilet is broken. So that's going to be my problem. And then who at the office are we going to send the message to? So I think we should send it to the security guard. So while you're typing all that up, I'll just leave our friend Moggy on there for a bit. Okay. So I did this task earlier because I figured that doing it across you know, a webinar would be particularly complicated if we had everybody that had to do it at the same time and input and everything like that. So and here's what I've come up with, and this is really like an example of what AI can do, but also do kind of badly, I guess, as well. So hi there. I know running an accounting firm in York comes with its fair share of challenges. Complex tax laws, demanding clients, and apparently a downstairs toilet door that refuses to cooperate. Now, I can't fix that door. You'll need a security guard or a monkey for that, but I can help with something just as urgent, getting you on the fast track to making millions by tomorrow afternoon. So there's no fluff, no gimmicks, just a straightforward way to bring in higher value clients and grow your firm faster than you thought possible. Fancy a quick chat before the overcast skies turn to rain? So that's just kind of an example of if you put something into AI without any context, what it can come up with, basically. So in essence, it is only as good as what you put into it and what references it has. And that's even with a fairly detailed prompt, I would say. So what I wanted to do is go through kind of, because this webinar is about kind of generating more revenue with AI. I think it's useful to kind of just revisit like how things have been done. So, you know, we had the one-to-one era. So essentially, like I've copied and pasted the same email. I may have changed the formatting, I may not have. and sending it to the same people, but without any kind of personalization. And then you had the grand mail merge era, where you had, the high first name and, basically semi-personalized based on the name, company name, and anything that they'd researched, where you could kind of change what was in those kind of squiggly brackets there about the persona or company. And then you had kind of the account-based marketing era, which was very like resource and time intensive, but really was trying to aim at kind of being more one-to-one. And that would take a personalized approach, like the mail merge, but it was much more about targeting the right account with the right message, and also personalizing to each individual decision maker job type as well. And now we're kind of hitting the AI powered era. So there is the capability, like you saw on the previous email, to send emails like that to your entire total addressable market within less than 5 minutes, if you have the right infrastructure set up, but also make the mistake within 5 minutes as well. And so if you can research at scale, you can essentially, send, personalized first lines about a company's challenges to thousands instead of hundreds of emails. And these can all be on individual enrichments or trigger events, like them visiting the website or a recent hire, all of those kind of things, and essentially make your emails kind of great again. So this was kind of just going on from the last slide. This is generally how things have been done, and probably to an extent how things are still done. You scrape a very large email contact base, then you would you would then ask for somebody at the company, if they knew somebody internally, to refer you to the person that you were trying to get in touch with. And then you'd convert some of those leads into phone calls and hopefully put some proposals together and close some deals. So this was actually known by Aaron Ross as the predictable revenue technique, and it became overused and became ineffective. And the reason I'm highlighting this is not just for a history of outbound email, but actually to show like how things go in cycles. And in actual fact, when a new technology comes about, everybody's excited and they want to play with it, but then they don't maybe look at the rationale around like what the message is and how that message can be used and what sort of response it's going to get, basically. So I want to show you a little bit about what you can use AI for today. So in terms of, if anybody has used, there's an app that's come out in the last year called Fixer, spelled FYXER.ai, and that essentially solves a problem around like email categorization. It gives you 2 or 3 ready-made templates that you can then just delete the other ones and send it. And this is really like solve the problem of basically having like inbox overload. And I think these sorts of use cases of AI are actually like really, really interesting. I think if you're looking to target your ideal customer profile, and you're looking to put together kind of a list of prospects that you want to target, you're going to have to do a lot of research around that. And there's also going to be a lot of admin. And I think automating some of these repetitive tasks, like researching the leads, what they've said on LinkedIn posts, any kind of company news, and then much more sort of simple admin, like as in removing the LTD or the LLC from the company name. All of these basically like tasks would have taken someone hours and hours before to research through like a list of say like 1,000 or more. And now this is kind of a function. So all of this work that doesn't essentially add value or make your outbound campaigns any better has now been can be automated with the right tools. So another use that I use AI for is essentially like brainstorming content, but not writing it. So essentially, like I'll be looking at content that I've already written before. I'll be looking at doing gap analysis around like which topics that I haven't written about that actually would be quite interesting, that are kind of like complementary or almost like lookalike topics to that. I use it for help with prioritization. If I know I've got a busy day and not everything can be done straight away. And, you can also use it for almost like an accountability partner for important tasks. And this is where I think for, if you think the UK economy is roughly, I think it's about 98% SMEs, a lot of those SMEs are, 5 or less people. And so having like almost like a sparring partner that you can work with can be like, incredibly valuable and useful. So the other thing is that the whole of the software game has completely changed, more so over the last, I'd say, like 4 months, where a lot of tools have popped up. So Claude AI is an example of released like artifacts where you can actually create fully coded software apps. You've got other apps like Cursor.ai, you've got Lovable.dev. There's all of these different tools that allow you to basically create kind of first versions, and in some case, depending on the complexity of it, full versions of software apps that already exist. And so I think there is a lot around visualizing ideas that previously would have had perhaps challenges around you not being able to code and having to learn to code, and actually having the time to do it as well if you were looking to launch something on the side, as an example, for a hobby project. So how is AI changing? So the way I look at it is there's essentially connection between different systems, and most of us already use some kind of system, whether it's Google Suite and Google Docs, or whether it's Microsoft Teams, all of those kind of different systems. And it's basically getting those systems to talk to each other. And then a lot of companies have challenges around data, where they have basically got databases that live in different areas of the business, and there isn't essentially a single source of truth there. And I think so connection between systems, I think, is one. And so what I've come up with is what I think is a really good basic SME tech stack. So I'm going to go through each one, like research, enrichment, and connection. And so for research, I think if you haven't tried any kind of AI, I think ChatGPT is really good to just give it a go, and that's OpenAI. I use Claude on the professional package, and Perplexity is very good as well. And this Perplexity actually goes off and finds actual sources for the research that it does, and allows you to do deep research as well. And I think that the deep research is really important, because quite often you'll get such a quick response, and you're so used to that kind of instantness of getting your response, that I find if you're doing much more in-depth research that's going to be useful to your work, Perplexity can be really, really valuable for doing that, basically. And it actually has citations with little numbers on each bit of where you can actually find those. So how could you use those in context of increasing revenue for your company? So Perplexity would be really good in terms of if you're looking for up-to-date information about a decision maker at a company, about company annual reports, any information that's publicly available on the web, you'd be able to find through Perplexity. Whereas on some of the existing LLMs like Claude and OpenAI, I think OpenAI more recently has changed this. They had like a cutoff date within their database of I think it was 2021. And so this has kind of really opened up like what you can do in terms of web research. I'm going to talk a bit more about Clay in a minute, but essentially if you have like a list of contacts that you want to enrich, and you want to find, email addresses for those, you want to find phone numbers, all of those different data points that are going to help you basically create a much more personalized and compelling campaign, then Clay can help you with that. And if Clay is kind of like the Google Sheets of, in terms of how it looks and works and everything, which we'll go into in a minute, Apify is kind of the source of that and can basically find you all of these different data points. It might be around people running Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads. You might want to just target those people, or it might be Google Maps and people that are listed on Google Maps. All of those kind of different things you can do with like an API marketplace like Apify. And then going back to the connection, actually like connecting everything together, make.com is kind of the way that you can create these like efficient processes to create it together. So this is a basic tech stack, and it will vary from type of company and industry and use case, but I think it's a fairly good place to start. So I just want to show you like how what's behind a lot of these tools. I think it's useful. So if you were to do, it could cost you a fortune if you're going to buy every tool on the market, but there's a cheaper but much longer way. So the shift that I've seen with AI and apps like clay.com is that essentially we've moved from like what I would call like a closed wall set of databases, so like your Zoom Info, Cognism, all of those different type of apps, to now there's actually a lot of publicly available data on your prospects that you can find on different databases. So this can be as simple as Googling, or it can be that it's on, if you want to find funding and revenue, you've got Crunchbase. And then, a way of enriching is actually finding like the technology and software that the prospects use that you are going after, and seeing if that's a better match, because actually if they've bought one software, they might be more qualified in terms of how much budget they've got, but also it might be that they have brought your competitors as an example, and they're coming up for a renewal, and they might consider your outreach. So let's say you went through all of those, you went through Crunchbase, you went on Built With, and you've gone on Google and you've used different search parameters to find this new data that's out there, but it's taken you a bit of graft to get there. How would you get AI to do the research for you with a set of instructions? Well, this is what I wanted to explain, is kind of how it works. So when most people think of AI, they think of what's on the right there, which is the large language model, or LLM. And essentially, they are great in terms of their capability to return information, but they are large and they need context, and they need to source external references, mainly because of a lack of kind of memory per se. And so what a middle layer, or what's being called like an MCP by Claude, is essentially like they organize and provide all that context. So think of it like a spreadsheet that can then be kind of sourced from there, and then can go back to OpenAI or Claude, and then use that information to actually basically produce something. So that could be anything from like a personalized first line for an email. It could be research on a company, decision makers that work there. All of that kind of stuff can be done through Clay. And then the intelligence part will be done through OpenAI or Claude. And then if you actually wanted to source the decision makers, that would be done from different sources, like LinkedIn as an example. So I've been talking about Clay for a few minutes now. What the heck is Clay? So think of it like Excel or Google Sheets. I'm sure you have all used one of those apps, in your day-to-day work. But imagine, instead of just like a column with a number or text in it, you could actually connect it to another website or app. So what is it you can actually do with middleware or apps like Clay? Well, no one really likes templated emails, and people make decisions. People who make decisions respond on being understood and valued. So how can you understand if there's hundreds of people out there, they're different challenges? So I've given a few examples that could be used in Clay today, and basically you could go and sign up for an account if you wanted to, and they'd give you a few thousand credits for free. But essentially, like, here's some real world use cases that we've actually used in our own kind of outbound campaigns, and we've also used it for clients we work with, depending on what's relevant for them. But it can be everything from like measuring demand by finding companies that are hiring for job roles relevant to your service, or it could be actually you've done like you've got like an idea of what your ideal customer profile is, or ICP, but you might have limited it to a few different data points. So that could have been the industry they're in, the size by the number of employees, the country they're based in, whether they're private company, and then you might have stopped after a few different areas and then said, right, that's my ICP. If you wanted a more detailed ICP, you could use Clay to actually like help you research that and look for commonalities. And that could be referring to what we just looked at earlier, like using the Built With database or the Crunchbase database, which can all be lined up as, data sources in Clay as an example. And one that I found incredibly useful, I'm just going to talk you through briefly how I did it, because I had a screenshot for it and everything like that, and I thought it'd be easier to just talk through it. Is I had a large list of about, I think it was 7,500 prospects, and I realized that quite a few of those were business consumer. And if you're in B2B, you'll know that every kind of prospect list that you've created to do any kind of outbound campaign, you quite often get B2C leads that actually sort of, slip in there, and then that can potentially look quite embarrassing for you if you outreach and they're like, well, we don't actually buy, it's consumers that buy from us, customers. And so basically I used it to sort through that list, and then essentially half the list of companies, and it validated whether it was B2B or B2C. And it did that all through a web research assistant, which then went on to each individual website, and it used credits from, the LLM, and then it kind of returned what it thought based on like a detailed criteria that I gave it of what a B2C website looked like and what a B2B one looked like. And the other thing you can use it for are things like prospect website research, not just B2B and B2C, but you can look at things like, do they have the word case studies on there? You can visit that page. You can basically like find all the clients that they have worked with and listed on the site, and use that as kind of part of your like intelligence that you then might want to use in terms of outreach as well. But that can also be used as a qualification criteria. So you kind of got different ways you can use it. So rather than think, what can Clay do? Think, what do I want to do? And is it available on the public web? And then can I use Clay to enable me to do that? So I've gone through, some hypothetical scenarios. I thought I'd go through like a real one. So the company we work with called BG Install, they recently wrapped, I think, a submarine for a defense company. And so they have done a lot of work around like the super yacht and boats industry. And really what they wanted to do was kind of carry on doing that work, but also do more of the work that they had started doing around hotels you would have heard of, and also retailers that they'd worked with through as a subcontractor. And so basically we worked with them on like, how could we use AI more intelligently to actually get them in the door with enterprise retailers and hoteliers. So here's how we did it. So first of all, we would look at kind of the difference between what it is that they offer, the actual offer that they were going to offer the market, and then what was their marketing claim, like what was it they were actually going to do that was kind of an impact on this client's business or prospect's business. So we used AI to find the number of offices or locations, which would have taken hours, if not days. If you look at companies like hotels, they're quite often franchised, which means it's very like fragmented and very, very hard to actually do the research manually. And so we looked at the number of locations that retailers had. And then for commercial offices, we looked at how many locations they had as well. And then we kind of came up with like a local angle. So it was all around like locations that needed to be within travel distance of Hampshire. And then the other thing we did is we used AI to sift through the different types of job titles. So it would be everything from like a retail decision maker that bought their service would be very different from a hotel decision maker. They've got completely different job titles. It wasn't the simplest thing to do. And so the other thing we did is we actually used all of that data, inputted it into our LLM, and then said, what are industries that match all of the criteria of growth that we actually want to help this client grow with, that aren't the ones that we've already mentioned? And from that criteria, it gave us new ideas around different industries that we could target, which meant we could do more campaigns for them and get them in the door with more of their ideal customers. So here's what we did on for their outbound email campaign. So the first thing is we used very, very short subject lines that look more like an internal email than a marketing email. And we basically kind of kept them really short, and we would say something like, Hampshire store work as an example. And then what we did is we used like their unique value proposition, and we also offered a guarantee. So what we said is basically, you don't have to pay us a penny, but we will come in and do like one of your tills or one of your bits of furniture, that kind of thing. All we're asking is, when you look to do more of this, that you consider us. And so this got quite a good response rate. We also use social proof as well. So they've done some work in store with M&S. And there is quite a compelling cost saving as well. It was like 70% on doing traditional, like buying new furniture. And there, there's a certain element of sustainability there as well. Here's the results that we got. So for anybody who doesn't know, typical reply rate on cold email is about 1%. So we basically exceeded that by quite a bit. This is just one of the campaigns. And then here's some actual proof of what we did. So one of the angles we had was before and after that you can see on the top left. And what we did is we just used that as would you like to see the before and after of when we've worked on these tills or these retail units? Yeah, sure. Everybody loves to see a before and after. So this was like a good way of keeping the conversation going and actually like engaging with the prospect. And so you'll see, obviously for GDPR, we've redacted, the names of people that work there. But yeah, essentially we got them in the door with like Yotel, Boots, Aldi stores, and also Lidl, which is not on there as well. And so to sort of wrap things up, I wanted to go, you've learned a bit about AI, you've learned a bit about how you can kind of implement it on a sort of task-based or practical level. But I just wanted to go through, like, from a strategy level, where your head is at with AI right now. So essentially, like any of these webinars, like I've turned up to, you've got sort of 2 or 3 choices. You can carry on doing what you're doing. And, like that was what happened in the 2000s when businesses kind of ignored the internet. Fast forward 2020, quite a lot of companies with COVID were like, this is the only way we're going to be able to survive. And then AI in 2025, I mean, generative AI, OpenAI has been going since 2022. And so it's, if you're ignoring AI, you're already behind. But if you're taking steps to spend some time learning it every day and what the possibilities are, then you can be kind of aware of what you can do and how that can help your business. So quite a lot of the clients I speak to have been doing what I would call like the short road, which I actually think is a really good idea. It's not a negative whatsoever. They're looking at something that's quicker and good to test the water. And it could be as simple as an app that plugs a hole. So for example, I use an app that records my meetings and then transcribes them, but doesn't just transcribe them. It gives me a whole like dossier of what the next actions and steps are. And that's really useful. You could say that that's useful on one level, but how much intelligence does it then take and how much initiative does it then take to revisit those meetings? That could be like almost a use case on from that. So the short road, I think, is incredibly useful to do. But I think when you move to the long road, all of those different apps may not necessarily work together. And so that's kind of like you're sort of plugging something for now, which is working, but then you want to think more long-term about what it could do. So the last point on the long road is, rather than thinking about is an app-based, short road the best way to go, or to do, a complete AI overhaul, it's actually thinking about, is it process orientated or is it task orientated? So the short road and the app-based is more of a task-based process, task-based approach, whereas a process orientated is going to be more, I'm taking a set of processes that somebody might do end to end, and then how could that be improved? What could be cut out of it? And what are any of the bottlenecks or potential areas that might mean it might become complicated, not potentially work? So it's kind of looking at, can you build out a process, and then within that process, could that be automated? So it's looking at it sort of top down, what needs to be done, what can be eliminated, what is a one-off task, and then focusing on what can be automated after you've kind of assessed those. And so if you're looking at doing the long road as an example, I would like put it into these 3 steps with a bit of a caveat. Centralizing your data, I know, is not easy for everybody in step 1, and as it's not always possible, I would say doing segmented kind of AI-driven workflows where you're maybe looking at just focusing on the sales and marketing part of your business as an example, with transparent AI, then like building out those workflows of the most time-intensive tasks, basically. And then I think that could be like the first step, but I do think centralizing your data is one of the biggest challenges, and it's also needed later on for basically having all of the information that then you can get a really good output, and you can't get that if you don't feed in the input. And then, automation to agents, so self-updating systems that learn and adapt. I think we're on the verge of getting there. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I do think that anybody who's not implementing, testing, failing a little bit, and then going back to improve it, and actually having these kind of horizontal agents, they're called, that do specific areas. So they might do a specific area like somebody would do a job. So it might be content marketing, that kind of thing. But I think it will need testing and it will need oversight from a human. So I think at the moment, where we are at the moment is kind of a mixture of AI-driven workflows that are overseen and monitored by humans to then set up automations to save time later is kind of where I would say we are. So you want to know how you can use it. So here's a real-world example. The average SDR or sales development rep is paid anything from sort of 50 to 60 grand a year, depending on what part of the UK you're in. And then on-target earnings could be well over 100K. And so what are they spending their time doing? So a lot of the time they're spending, nearly 70% of their time on admin. And that admin is actually quite important to then personalize and make sure they've got the right prospects and all of the other job responsibilities of an SDR, but it's not spent selling. And this is actually, I would say, harping growth for a lot of SMEs that are looking to scale up with high costs, low productivity, and not reaching the right prospects at the right time. So potentially missing opportunities. You could see the opportunity as reallocating this towards growth rather than necessarily like job losses. And I think that's the key part of this, is that you're actually looking to develop some cost savings or automations as opportunities rather than necessarily just cost cutting. So with that in mind, let's look at the 4 pillars that I've created for revenue bottlenecks for UK SMEs looking to scale up. So the 4 pillars I've come up with are lead generation, sales execution, growth limitations, and then sales operations. So if you see any of these on this slide and you kind of go, oh yeah, we've got a bit of a problem with that, you're not alone. There's so many companies that I've worked with in the B2B software, technology, and services industry that have these problems quite a lot of the time. And I think it's a case of they're trying to do too much in some ways. The lead generation one, I showed you an example of how that worked well, like better targeting, more intelligence, and basically like speeding up the research time. And then the growth limitations really are kind of not just about what you're doing day to day, but actually like, how could you be more intelligent with predicting pipeline? Are you missing upsell opportunities because that's like another thing for a salesperson to do or for you to do, which means that you're missing it. So it's like having time to think and having that time saved so that you can think and make those better decisions. And then what I see on the sales ops side of things is just people, basically you've got, if you think of any system where you have to export one thing and then basically re-import it to another, you're basically communicating that the app that you are already in doesn't do the thing that you want it to do. So you've exported it so you can then import it. And so if you could basically connect those systems, that would solve a lot of time if you think about the amount of exporting and importing as a basic example. And there's so many around sales execution. I think it's not just missed follow-ups, but it's like the wrong type of follow-ups at the wrong time, all of those kind of things. So, I mean, this is how, just a little bit of an overview of how we work. So we work on kind of revenue modules or AI revenue modules where we look at what the individual problems are, and then we look at using those modules to solve those problems, basically. So those are just a few of the examples that are there. And what we've actually done is we've created a AI revenue report, which there'll be a link that's shared around, and you can essentially do, I think it's a 12 or 13 questions, and it will give you kind of an idea of which of those 4 pillars I showed you earlier that you need potential improvement or to review to basically scale your business. I'm Mark Cann. I've really enjoyed researching this presentation, giving it, and thank you for organising it, Luke and James.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was super interesting. We have had some questions actually flying in as well, and I suppose a few. I'm just thinking of the best kind of order to approach those, but I suppose we could start with the three areas there. So do nothing, the short road, the long road, and then the steps you had on the next slide as well. The question came in there around what are the biggest barriers to businesses, what are the biggest barriers businesses face when adopting AI in client acquisition, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, good question. So I think the first one is just going back to what I mentioned earlier, is just the knowledge gaps. So I think it's very hard to kind of win leadership over internally if you don't know enough about the topic and you've just heard it's a trend. So I think the first thing that can be done is basically kind of almost like scheduling in half an hour in the morning to actually use AI. And then being able to kind of see the differences, see what's capable, see what is not capable just yet, and then be able to do that. I would also say the key challenges is around data fragmentation. So we talked about it earlier, where there's disparate databases that are sitting across the business, and I think that's one of the areas that the AI could actually help with. But it's also, you kind of need a single, one source of truth when you're actually getting started for AI to refer to. And then I think, the other thing is, moving from, say, basic automation to more sort of intelligent workflows. So that's more of like a mindset. So it's kind of like getting the business to invest in it, but also invest in the methodology of this is a more long-term, better way of doing things. And then depending on who it is you're working with, it could be a cultural shift around like how many sales reps or marketing managers actually want to work with this assisted AI technology. Some people might be adverse to it. So those are some of the ones. And I think a lot of that can be overcome by education. I think, being able to talk with authority on it because you've actually researched it and you know that this is actually going to be helpful rather than a hindrance, that in itself, I think is really, really important.
Definitely, Mark. Yeah, and there's some great questions flying in here. Again, let me come to this one. Someone says the stats for outbound and manual outreach is 5% response rate. How is AI going to improve that? Their understanding is that it saves you time to do the research, but not necessarily affecting the response rate.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to sort of address there is like outbound has definitely got harder and more expensive. And I think the key thing is like how you do outbound. So when you talk about a response rate, which is fairly low, well, that's sort of across the industry, and that's based on, doing outbound perhaps not that well. I think you can basically target more and segment more kind of smaller, so that actually each individual message that is going to a cohort of people, I'm not saying every message needs to be completely 100% personalized, but you're personalizing towards like a job title as an example, rather than whether somebody likes Man United. And it's basically like really understanding somebody's challenge and also presenting them with an offer that is actually going to get their attention. And the reason I think that presenting an offer to get somebody's attention is so important is because of the way that people think about outbound email. They think it's free and they can send as many emails as they want. But in actual fact, like people's attention is more and more fragmented, and lots of email, decision makers are receiving lots of emails. So the way that I explain it to my clients is you should consider a subject line and the first line a bit like a character limit that you would get in an ad or a Twitter update. And the reason for that is that is really your hook of trying to get the person to like look at the rest of the email and respond. And so a lot of the customers that I speak to haven't got a tangible offer, and that's why they get poor response rates. And what I mean by that is they think the service of what they actually deliver is the offer, whereas the offer is more around what is the client going to get? Is there a risk guarantee? There's all other elements and factors that make up the offer. And I've got plenty of, I've got some really good, basically material around kind of an offer framework as well, which I'm happy to send anyone if they're interested.
That's right, Mark. I know firsthand that you're excellent at this stuff, and selling the sizzle rather than the sausage, I suppose. It's that kind of clickbait kind of mentality, isn't it, to really capture the imagination. But I'm going to roll on with the questions because there are quite a few to crack through. This one's caught my eye to go to next. How can AI integrate with and enhance the work of traditional sales teams without replacing the human element of relationship building?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. They need to be spending more time building the relationship than necessarily. And at the moment, a lot of the SDRs are spending time doing like manual research, going on the prospect's website, going on LinkedIn, all of these other activities, which isn't leading to having more conversations, basically. So I think that's the first part. And then I think, traditionally, salespeople have hated updating CRMs, and it's kind of a bit of a running joke between a lot of like sales directors, sales managers, and their team. And so updating, not having to update the CRM, well, that would be a fantastic automation for people who traditionally don't really want to update the CRM, but then their managers actually need that so they can understand at what stage the deal is at.
Definitely, Mark. Yeah, for sure. Right, I'm going to try and bunch two questions together now. They might, so throwing a lot at you here, Mark, but hopefully they kind of flow semi-well. So let's have a look here. What metrics should be used to track and measure the effectiveness of AI-driven strategies? And as a follow-on, there's this question here around, where was it now? Apologies there. Once a client has been acquired, can AI be used effectively to help them retain them as well? So
so I think the first one, in terms of the measurement, I think it should be looked at in terms of kind of time saving per function or job. So typically, like an SDR, as an example, going back to that example, should see like 30 to 40% reduction in their tasks that they need to do that are admin based, which means they should be able to spend more time on selling and speaking to clients and relationship building. And sorry, what was the other question?
So once a client has been acquired, can I? Or was it the first one that you wanted there, Mark, as opposed to that? Once a client have been acquired, can AI be used effectively to retain them as well?
That's a difficult one, because I would say yes, depending on how many touch points that they need. Like, is it a low value sale? In which case, generally what you've had before is in an account manager and account based strategies, you would generally look after the clients that spent more, would probably get more time allocated to them. That's just kind of like business. And I think if that's the case with AI, you would think they would get a better level of service from AI enabled customer service or client management. And then the account manager or the business owner could spend more time on a kind of a white glove service to those kind of high value accounts, is what I would say. Yeah. So I would look at it as a split strategy rather than a yes or no answer to that question.
Definitely, Mark. One came before the event as well that I'm just going to come to, because they weren't able to make it but wanted to share this question. So they've heard a lot about the AI in sales. Most of it, they think it's like hype. So just focusing on the tangible results that you've actually seen from implementing these types of systems. So again, you've covered some of that within your slide decks there, but it's just nice to kind of capitalize on some of that.
Yeah, so I think it does go back to the tangible examples that I gave from BG Install. So, we basically got them a 6.7% response rate, generated, like a number of meetings each month. And essentially, like these weren't with small companies. And I think the other interesting thing is when you're looking at B2B marketing for SMEs rather than enterprise brands that have a lot of brand awareness and they spend a lot of money being sort of top of mind, you've got to remember that small companies like BG Install are not doing any other marketing. So this is just one channel, and it's it was based purely on the offer being compelling of that one channel. Now, that's not to say that I'm saying that what would work for them would work for everybody, but it does. If you looked at that and you started to introduce other channels, LinkedIn, perhaps like the phone as well, all of these different like phone follow-ups from emails, those kind of different channels, I think all of a sudden you start to have a more compelling case for increasing the number of meetings, opportunities, and revenue. So I would say that is kind of really, it's a case of you have to understand where it is your bottlenecks are first, where it is that you're spending a lot of time, but they aren't actually like high value activities, and then look at how the automation can help with that, rather than like kind of a handoff, as in like AI being like replacing everything. And if it doesn't, because it's a split test against the existing employee, then we're not going to bother with it anymore. It's you're looking at different areas that you're going to use it for time saving.
Definitely, Mark. Well, thank you very much, Mark. It's been a really, really great session. Thank you to the audience that have joined us today. I know it's going to go out on YouTube afterwards as well. And Mark, we're going to share your slides and particularly the offer that you put up at the end of the deck there, aren't we? So please do look out for that in your inboxes. So I guess it just comes to a time as we rattle towards 2 o'clock to kind of close the session, and just once again to thank everyone involved. Just before we close, if you aren't aware of Eagle Labs and what we do visit labs.uk.barclays. Find out about all the support that's available to businesses that just like yours. With loads of exciting programs on this year. That so you've just got to keep a beady eye on our socials as well. So look out for Barclays Eagle Labs. Personally, I'd love to connect with anyone. So as well, look for both Mark and I on LinkedIn, because we're very happy to continue conversations outside of this webinar. Yeah, if you're already a member with us at Barclays and you already know Eagle Labs, perhaps, and this is a UK-wide webinar, and perhaps reach out to your local contact as well, because there's loads of support on locally to you as well. So we're going to draw the webinar to a close there. I hope you all have a great afternoon and a great rest of the week. And that's it from Mark and I. Thank you.